Good evening, everyone. Welcome to episode 8 of the Poems and Stories series. Again, we are reading an older book that is falling apart just so that we can get those stories in and see the kind of things that were happening previously. Our story today is called The Application. Everyone who draws a salary, from the office boy to bank president, is selling something to earn the money. The office boy is selling neat appearance, punctuality, politeness, and readiness to do whatever is asked of him. The bank president is selling his honesty and good judgment, and his ability to oversee a reasonable organization. In the following story, pick out the things that the stranger says the boy should have offered to sell to be worth a job. You don't deserve a job. The tall young man who had stood beside Billy Langford in the office of the Kerrigan Construction Company had followed him out and now stood at his elbow in the street, apparently with the sole purpose of delivering his decidedly personal comment. Billy had just failed to secure the place of timekeeper for which he had applied. He had wanted the place very much indeed, he believed. He had made up his mind to earn money this summer, and the timekeeper at Kerrigan's received $10 a week for what Billy had understood was only very moderate exertion. Now the sudden sharp criticism from a stranger sounded like a gratuitous insult. Billy flared. "Well, say," he began. "Don't get angry now," interrupted the other, his bright brown eyes holding Billy's steadily. "You thought you could get that job when you went in there, didn't you?" Billy wanted to answer sharply and escape, but the very unusualness of the attack waked his curiosity. "Of course I thought I could get it," he answered. "Why?" Billy found himself at a momentary loss for an answer. "You told Andy Janes, the manager, that you had no experience, didn't you?" "Yes, but you didn't like the idea of getting to the gate at 7:30 in the morning, did you?" "I didn't say any such—" "No, you only looked it. You were surprised that you would have to stay till 6:30 at night, weren't you?" Billy stopped answering. He was angry, but he felt the blood rise slowly in a hot wave over his cheeks and neck, and he found it hard to continue looking resentfully up into the brown eyes. "And you lost my place. And you resented the idea that the timekeeper had to help in the shipping room when he was off the gate, didn't you?" Billy backed away against the fence. He wanted to shout aloud a denial of this series of charges, but he could not say a word. He knew that there was truth in every one of them. "Janes knew how you felt," asserted his unpleasant new acquaintance. "Both he and I saw you were trying to cheat him." "Cheat him?" "Certainly. You had nothing to sell, had you? Neither experience, nor knowledge, nor willingness to work. All you wanted was to get his $10 a week and get it easy. You had no notion of being worth $10 a week, had you?" The young man stood silent a moment, waiting. Billy Langford was raging. He was angry enough to strike, but he knew that what had been said to him was not unjust, and that fact held his tongue and hand. "Do you know what you have done this morning?" asked his accuser. "You've started a reputation." Then the man turned away. Billy was left alone, standing with his back to the fence, his hands gripping the pickets behind him, his face and his heart burning as he had never known them to burn before. A volunteered reprimand from an utter stranger. It was some minutes before Billy turned and walked slowly away down the street, hardly knowing where he meant to go. It had been bad enough to think of going home and reporting his failure. Now he felt as if he had been whipped, and for something too downright disgraceful to report at all. Who the man might be, or how he had happened to see and hear the application to Mr. Janes, Billy did not know. It was very strange that he should have gone out of his way to denounce an action that did not concern him. It was certainly very officious of him. The town in which Billy lived was a very large one. It seemed improbable that he would ever meet the stranger again. He would be unlikely ever again to see Mr. Janes of the Kerrigan Construction Company. Billy had heard of the vacant position through a man his father knew in the Kerrigan office. That man need hear only that Billy had not secured the place. What did the fellow mean when he said, "You've started a reputation"? "A reputation as a cheat," Billy said, half aloud involuntarily. "It's so. They saw both of them saw through me. I'm a cheap little shirk, and I'm not worth anyone's $10 a week, and they both know it." The boy's mind was stung to the quick. His conscience was stirred. "I must go and get a place to work somewhere now," he thought. "I must. I've got to prove that chap wrong." He hurried on, thinking, planning, squirming under the memory of the scathing rebuke he had received. When it occurred to him that the criticism, if not merely an ill-natured affront, must have had a friendly impulse. "He told me where my mistake was," said the boy to himself. "What did he do it for?" As he remembered it now, there appeared to have been no contempt in the young man's tone. There had been only a sharp incisiveness and an earnest effort to convince. Billy's ideas grew clearer. That last phrase about reputation. He must go back and try to change the impression he had created at Kerrigan's. He was 2 miles from the construction company's office when he reached this conclusion. He remembered Andrew Jane's shrewd gaze and shrank from the prospect of facing it again. But an hour and a half later, the talk at the picket fence, But an hour and a half after the talk at the picket fence, Billy Langford stood again at the railing beside Mr. Jane's desk. "I came back, Mr. Janes," he said. The manager's gray eyes narrowed in puzzled fashion for an instant. Then he said, "What for?" "Because I'm ashamed of having applied as I did, of thinking only about the salary and not about the work. A man who heard me talk to you told me I showed what I was thinking of by that, and I came back to square myself." Mr. Janes leaned back in his chair. "And you came back here to tell me this?" "Yes, sir." Billy flushed. "The timekeeper's job was filled this morning." "I suppose so." "Then why do you suppose I care anything about you and your application?" Billy felt rebuffed. "I haven't any idea you do," he answered. "But I'd like you to know that I did have a decent idea of earning the money I want to get." Mr. Janes wrote a few words on a slip of paper and then pointed to a glass door across the hall. "Take this to Mr. Walter Kerrigan in that room," he said. Billy took the slip and obeyed the direction. He knocked at the glass door and opened it. Then he stood still with amazement. The man standing by a window was the man who had talked to him in the street. Are you Mr. Kerrigan?" stammered Billy. "I'm Mr. Kerrigan, Jr., replied the young man. "I've come back," said Billy. "I knew you would if you had any self-respect. That's why I said what I did to you. I thought you looked like a boy who only needed waking up." Billy stood silent a moment. Then he said, "Mr. Kerrigan, I know the timekeeper's job is filled, but I want a chance to show you." Mr. Kerrigan smiled as Billy hesitated and stopped. "I am quite sure you do," he answered. "That's why you came back. And I think I can find a place for a boy who feels that way." By Gardner Hunting. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. As a reminder, I'm reading these books as verbatim as I best can, so any inappropriate or disrespectful words or phrases that may have been used do not reflect my personal or professional opinions. I'm just reading them as they were written. If you are a book restorer and have any interest in restoring any of the books that I feature on this channel, please let me know. I would love to work with you to help save these books from any further degradation. Thank you so much for your time, folks. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.